So we've been reporting on intrusion for quite a while now. Unfortunately, a bulk of our cases relate to ransomware attacks. So the reality is ransomware attacks are still happening. So today we're going to be covering the trends and observations from our cases in the last year. So, by the way, we got an article, it's like a retrospective year in review. So we'll pull out the highlights from that. But we're going to be focusing on initial access brokers that often leads to a ransomware attack, and then a breakdown of the attack objectives from an attacker point of view, and then a little bit of DFIR to understand who's on your network and how we can track those. Some of the attacker tooling that we've seen, some common ones, and then some new ones, and techniques as well. And then finally, some useful resources for defenders. So I'll pass you over to my colleague, who will cover the first few points.
Yep, thank you, Ryan, and thank you, Peter, first off. So throughout the year 2022, we witnessed a multitude of cyber attacks that can be broadly categorized into two distinct groups: phishing and non-phishing threats. Among the cyber threats we encountered, phishing attacks continue to emerge, and these attacks can take on numerous forms, but two prevalent methods we witnessed during 2022 involved the use of malicious files. The first method frequently employed by cybercriminals was to use zip files containing malicious link files. And for those unfamiliar, link files are shortcuts commonly used in Windows operating system to access specific programs or files quickly. However, link files can be embedded with malicious code that, when executed, can compromise a victim system or steal sensitive information. And the second method involved the use of an ISO file that also contained a malicious link file. And we saw the evergreen Emotet family to use this technique very often. By packaging a malicious link file within an ISO file, cybercriminals sought to exploit the victims who may have been exploring or opening the contents of such files. And two groups are the masters in this case, Qbot family and the ID gang. And as we all know, Microsoft has worked hard over the last year to limit the usage of macros inside the Office suite. These adjustments appear to assist end users at first, but we are aware that attackers have continued to use this strategy. And depending on the situation, we discovered that the malicious document either contained exploits for no CVEs, like in the case of Follina, or attempted to infect the user workstation with no malware families such as Qbot and Emotet again. And one notable example of using an ISO file for malicious goal is represented by the Bumblebee malware. Link file, as mentioned earlier, serves as a shortcut to a specific program or file. And in fact, in this case, a malicious link file is designed to trigger an authorized action when opened. And in particular, the action is aimed at launching a cmd.exe instance to execute malicious DLL using run tt2 window commands. And again, this is instead a real example of malicious Excel document which try to exploit the CV 2022-30-190, better known, of course, as Follina. And indeed, in addition to phishing attacks, cyber threats continue to exploit specific vulnerabilities and employ brute force attacks to compromise systems. And in our case, the affected systems were mainly Microsoft Exchange and Managed Engine Support Center Plus. But, however, I would like to point your attention to a significant growing trend that we identified in 2022. And I'm referring to SEO poisoning. SEO poisoning is an emerging technique employed by cybercriminals to manipulate search engine results in order to redirect unsuspecting users to malicious websites. And these techniques aims to exploit the trust user place in search engine and their top search results. And one prominent criminal groups associated with SEO poisoning is bootloader. Their activity have been extensively analyzed in our report titled SEO Poisoning, a bootloader story. And now we would like to explore the behavior of these groups and their tactics in more details. And in particular, the user might search for something specific, such as Olympus Playa agreement in this case. The search results are manipulated so that a malicious website or link appears among the top search results. And after that, the user clicked on the second search results, landing on a website that triggered the download and the execution of a malicious JavaScript file. Upon execution of the malicious JavaScript file, bootloader employee encoded PowerShell script to load CoverStrike, and this enabled the threat actor to establish persistence on the host. And they achieve this through a combination of a registry key and scheduled task, ensuring that their presence persists. Then the threat actor uses sharedown for Active Directory recon, allowing the attacker to discover attacks paths within the network. And the threat actor collects the results obtained from sharedown and proceed to pivot to another host using a CoverStrike PowerShell beacon. And after a couple of days doing recon and lateral movement, the attacker leaves the network. And this is what, next slide, Peter. This is one of the most essential slides for me, not because it describes the attack lifecycle, which we all know about, but because it provides us with an in-depth look into where threat actors spend their time. And while the attack life cycle may follow a similar pattern, the specific technique and focus area may vary based on the attacker's goals and objective. So let's delve into some key points. For example, in persistence, to use of scheduled task is a favorite method for achieving persistence. By creating scheduled tasks with malicious payload or commands, attackers can ensure their presence. And additionally, creating new user account or machine or domain controller can also serve as a way of maintaining access over the compromised network. Or for the recon phase, recon play, of course, a crucial role in an attacker's strategy. And all threat actors need to perform some kind of recon. Gathering as much information as possible about the target environment helps them identify potential vulnerability and plan subsequent stages of the attack. Tools such as AdFind or Invoke-Sharefinder and others are commonly used for recon purpose. These tools help attackers discover information about the network architecture, user accounts, shared resources, and so on and so forth. In any intrusion involving lateral movement, recon has to be done frequently, and this could be a key place to detect or stop an intrusion path. Again, the objective of attackers can significantly influence their tactics and approach. If the goal is information exfiltration, speed and stealth become crucial. Attackers will prioritize quick and discrete action to avoid detection while extracting valuable data. Instead, if the objective is to encrypt the entire infrastructure, as for example in ransomware attacks, attackers may take a slower and more deliberate approach. They carefully study the target infrastructure, compromise multiple workstations, and strategically plan the encryption process to maximize the impact and potential ransom payment. And it is important to note that threat actors continuously adapt their TTPS to evade detection and maximize their chance of success. Having said that, let's now analyze which compromise was the fastest and which instead was the slowest. The award for quickest compromise goes to Qbot. We have a look at that a few scenario, and in the first one, the attackers mostly engaged in a recon operation before being able to access all the data on a file server. And as is seen from this image, the compromise times 2 is about 1 hour and 30 minutes. However, in the second instance, the compromise happened even more quickly, since the malicious actor took control of the system in about 30 minutes, escalated to system, gathered artifact like the LSASS process, used cover strike, gathered the information he was interested in, and then made an exfiltration. In these circumstances, we may categorically state that Qboot is unquestionably the fastest entity on Earth. Why is this? Because as was already established, the main goal of the Qboot family is information theft. So their key goal is to do all tasks as quickly and stealthy as they can. But also they seem to opt for spreading in an environment as a cat priority as well. And at least our current dataset only show that exfiltration. On the other side, Conti's compromise was the longest one examined, and it ran for 19 days. Everyone is familiar with Conti, I think. In particular, in this particular instance, IZD was used to carry out the first compromise, which was followed by recon work, a lot of lateral movement, and the placement of Cobra Strike beacons. We have also seen the download of fresh executable to specific computer, as well as lateral transfer using well-known RMM technologies. And after the ransomware was installed on all of the affected computer were encrypted, the compromise was then completed. And attackers put a lot of emphasis on the recon phase, as we previously said. And while some approach remain the same throughout the time, others are becoming more popular. Peter will soon discuss the latter, but for the time being, it is clear that AdFind continued to be one of the most popular tools for recon in Active Directory environments. And during our analysis, we discovered it as a batch file or as an executable one. The program enables you to enumerate a large amount of data, including people who are members of a domain, connected computer object, all subnet, etc., and so on and so forth. Instead, Invoke-Sharefinder, that is a component of the Powershell package, is another tool that is frequently used to continue the recon phase while moving the attention to network files. And the ShareFinder components make it possible to list shares on hosts in the local domain that can be easily combined with other scripts to enumerate all machines in the domain. And the use of more or less well-known and legal remote control software for malicious reason is another trend we have noticed but cannot label as new. The most common ones seen are clearly AnyDesk and Tactical RMM, but it's crucial to understand that using these programs make life easier for attackers, since they enable the usage of several functions and something that to a novice may appear to be entirely legal. Though these tools are also quite appealing because to the feature built into them, such as the capacity to download, of course, or upload a file or folder. And in recent years, threat actors have incorporated log beans into their attack kill chains. Log beans are legitimate Microsoft Signet binary that attackers exploit to bypass security defense and launch attacks without importing additional tools. One commonly exploited log bean is Window Management Instrumentation, WMI, which is a subsystem of Powershell user for standardized data and information management in Windows. While WMI is intended for system management, attackers leverage it for malicious activity, such as lateral movement and for persistence. And let's explore a couple of these opportunities. For example, for defense evasion and discovery, malware authors uses WMI's integration with popular scripting language to evade security product and detect virtual environment, terminating the malware if detected. Lateral movement, instead, attackers use the window remote management, WinRM service, which interact with WMI to perform lateral movement within compromised networks. And this involves using command like WinRM, CMD, or PowerShell to interact with the remote system. And now back to Peter.
Thank you. So AD enumeration is a very common technique that we observe in our cases. So this is quite an important post-exploitation step for the threat actor, because this helps establish situational awareness of the target environment by identifying resources such as computers, user accounts, access controls, and domain configurations. What's interesting about this technique, we see it repeated throughout an intrusion. So especially during lateral movement. So if the attacker jumped onto another part of a network, so they're verifying new information, such as any local accounts or any other domains that they've got onto. So we've mentioned AdFind, so that is a very popular tool. In a recent case, we observed a threat actor using a different tool called ADGet. So ADGet, similar to AdFind, is a command line driven Windows application. So as a minimum, it expects the name of a target zip file. And this is used then to save AD collected information to. So inside this zip file will be collected artifacts from the AD, including computers, user accounts, domains, trust, and controllers. So the difference between ADGet and AdFind, ADGet has no LDAP strings put in a command line or anything. It's all built in. So this makes detection a little bit harder. There are some command line promises that can be used, but we haven't observed them yet. There is little information surrounding this tool, but we were able to determine that the AD enumeration was done using our LDAP requests, and these requests were sent via the global catalog port 3268 rather than a typical 389 port. So as mentioned, ADGet hard codes all the LDAP search strings within the code. So when we did the static analysis, we could see the strings in those. Focusing our detection on AD interactions via LDAP requests, we can start to inspect the behaviors with these requests. So how does the client ADGet interact with the server? So if we configure monitoring via Windows event 4662, so which is recorded when an operation was performed on a object, so in this case a read property, when a request is made for AD objects, we could see that over 600 attributes were being requested when searching for computer objects. So that's a very high number of attributes. So this is largely due to the global catalog replica requests. And also we discovered the use of a null-based search that was implemented in ADGet. So effectively this was requesting everything in the AD forest. And for a computer object, less than 30 attributes were successfully returned. So over 600 actually requested, but only 30 returned. So detailed analysis of the LDAP requests using an engineering event 1644, which you can configure for login for troubleshooting LDAP, we could see a high performance impacting query by the pages being referenced. And with a starter node of root directory service entry, root DSE, instead of a distinguished name. With the APIs monitored, we could also see the same data. So API called will null for the base object, and the analysis of the network traffic also confirmed the same. So using 4662 is a useful detection opportunity for looking for unusual object requests. So this could be an indication of AD enumeration. In this case, the global catalog LDAP request for entire forest. Here are some interesting techniques we've observed in the last year. So one case, observed the operator query the Windows security audit event log for specific user accounts and endpoints. So this was quite clever. So they compromised an account and they wanted to know what other resources that account could access. So a good way to look at that was in the event log, which confirmed if there was successes or denies. So this was using a passive means rather than actually interrogating all resources. A similar technique has been observed by an APT actor known as Lusker. Other interesting techniques, so instead of bringing their own tools, the threat actor instead added a built-in Windows feature called Remote Server Administration Tool, and then used PowerShell to query the domain. So this is a very new approach for tool ingress. So rather than bringing tools in externally, internally, they just had a look what was installed and then used the Windows installation manager to enable certain features. And it's not something we've seen before. And another similar trick, the threat actor completely uninstalled Defender via Windows features rather than disabling the service or adding exclusion paths. And we could see a lot of code reuse. So this could be from public available resources. So we've seen PowerShell scripts for directory and file discovery from Pentest GitHub repositories, and also CoverStrike customizations. Finally, we always come across offset mistakes made by the operator. So this can be mistakes relating to using the incorrect tool, such as NS lookup against a username rather than a host. Other ones happen when they're using a C2 framework. So for example, we saw CoverStrike command DC sync and shell keywords being entered within the command shell directly on the endpoint rather than through a beacon task. Sometimes operators struggle with tools, and like us, we've seen them use PowerShell get help command. In two separate cases, the threat actor focused on device drivers. So some context on device drivers. If a threat actor can exploit a vulnerable driver or load their own driver, they could potentially achieve system level access. So in the USNIF case, the threat actor, as part of discovery, collected information about installed drivers. Then in a separate case involving Emotet and Quantum, the threat actor installed their own driver called PowerTool. So this was interesting, as the driver is provided to keep your computer clean of rootkit viruses. But operating in a system context, this can be abused to kill processes, including security tools. So threat actors bringing their own device drivers is uncommon, but does highlight the vast number of techniques that they've got at their disposal. So one of the key actions to prevent that is monitoring installed device drivers and use across endpoints, and identifying vulnerable drivers or known bad drivers is key. Secondly, correlating endpoints against unavailable security tooling could indicate underlying issues. We see PowerShell used for a range of purposes, from tool ingest through security tool tampering, multi-stage delivery, and use for CoverStrike beacon execution. And I even recall Ryan recently shared PowerShell code relating to data exfiltration by Vice City. So when we start analyzing PowerShell commands, specifically around base 64 encoded commands, we can start to see patterns. For example, we can see code reuse, overlapping tooling, and out-of-the-box configuration for payload generation. Then we can start to fingerprint base 64 encoded strings. So this isn't a new concept, and prior work has been done by others. Virtually all threat actors were observed using a combination of two base 64 encoded strings, starting with JAB and SQB. And some of these date back years, at least to 2020. And little has changed since then. Even in recent cases, we still see similar fingerprints. So Riot, Bootloader, Qbot, Conti all use PowerShell and share similar indicators. PowerShell Windows events, specifically 4104, will record activity relating to suspicious keywords, including in memory. These will appear as a warning in the event log. So for example, in one case, we can see a service start event with a PowerShell encoded command that once decoded references a memory stream keyword. This event is logged as a warning, and this activity is related to CoverStrike beacon being loaded. Other interesting PowerShell activity, a threat actor displayed a message box on every compromised endpoint on the network. There's been an increase in the use of remote services, such as remote desktop protocol. There are several reasons for this. One, to act as a fallback comms in the event of if any implants fail due to technical issues or detection. Plus, RDP allows the operator to blend their activities. However, there are some risks. Quite often, we'll see use of RDP established early on in intrusion, and then proxy through other processes during the attack lifecycle. So this is a risk, especially if you have processes don't typically use port 3389. So a number of Windows events capture indicators of RDP activity, and despite using proxy processes, the operator's client machine can be exposed. So this is separate from C2 infrastructure, where implants call back to listening posts. This is exposing the attack box. So for example, in event 4779, we could see a compromised account being accessed, but the client name was Hyper-V. The IP address showed the compromised endpoint as it was being used as a proxy, but the client name wasn't a standard naming convention in use on the target network. All threat groups associated with access brokers and ransomware delivery use some form of payload to establish a foothold and to deliver threats. Sometimes payloads fail to the operator, why it's not failed isn't immediately obvious. But if the failure is related to a crash, then a Windows error reporting can log this event. So this can be quite a rich resource, as crash dumps can also be collected, which can be analysed. So in one case, the operator encountered numerous issues deploying Cobalt Strike beacons and other tools. The operator initially thought it was AV blocking or some kind of software restriction policy. So it tried renaming files to blend in. And when this didn't work, added extra characters and double extensions. The main issue was a defective payload, either due to platform or shell code being launched. The NSA provided a useful note indicating that application crashes could warrant further investigations. So these aren't security events, so there will be other benign crashes on the network, such as Office, Word crashing, and so on. But if you see spikes in these, it can be quite a useful resource. Cobalt Strike remains a popular C2 framework. We see Cobalt Strike used extensively across our cases. One reason why it's still popular is likely due to ease of use. Operators know how to use the framework, and learning a new C2 framework in terms of configuring, training, and upskilling is quite expensive. So another reason, despite Cobalt Strike being fingerprinted and extensively analysed with detections, is still not having an impact of ransomware intrusion operation. So if that does change, it's likely groups will adapt by changing the tooling and use alternative procedures. Monitor AV logs. The groups like dropping a lot of tools on endpoints, and it's likely something will trip. So understand your AV configuration. What endpoints are onboarded? Is it in audit or block mode? Understand what gets prevented and how it works in terms of alerting. So assume compromise by emulating the adversary. The Atomic Red team provide some testing resources for this. We've talked about how the attackers spend time on your network, understanding the environment. So as a defender, you should spend time understanding your environment, and it's your advantage. So try understanding what you can discover, what's exposed, what needs to be locked down, what are your critical resources, and how to put monitoring in place. There are active measures you can take for detecting the activity early. So that is key. The earlier it's spotted, the earlier you can respond to it. So this includes setting up tripwires using honey tokens. So this could be like privileged accounts or files on network shares. It won't stop attackers, but you've got it well tuned and set up for detection. It will illuminate their activity if they trip a monitor resource. Finally, prepare for an incident. Having a well-rehearsed incident response plan, how to do that response containment, will assist in knowing what needs to be done from detection, remediation through to recovery. Lastly, a big thanks to the DFIR Report crew for publishing and sharing insights into the intrusions we've mentioned into this presentation.